They told her she was nothing more than a dropout. They told her that scrubbing grease off plates was the only future she deserved. But at 3 a.m., in the back of a dimly lit diner in downtown Chicago, a billionaire CEO witnessed something that defied all logic. He watched a tired, trembling waitress solve a mathematical problem on a dirty napkin that his own senior engineers had failed to crack for 6 months. Why was a genius washing dishes in the middle of the night? And why was she terrified of being seen? The truth wasn't just about poverty. It was a conspiracy that went all the way to the Ivy League. When he found out why she skipped school, he didn't just give her a tip. He gave her enemies a war. You won't believe the twist in Part 6. The grand clock in the lobby of the Fairmont Hotel in Chicago struck 2:45 a.m., but the elegance of the marble floors and the velvet furniture didn't reach the basement. Down here, in the industrial kitchens that serviced the hotel's 24-hour room service and the adjacent high-end diner, the Gilded Spoon, the air didn't smell like expensive perfume. It smelled of stale frying oil, bleach, and exhaustion. Cassidy Blake wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a smudge of grease across her pale skin. Her hands were raw. The pink, chemical burn of industrial detergent had started to peel the skin around her fingernails, despite the yellow rubber gloves she wore. She was 19 years old, but in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the dish pit, she looked 10 years older. "Faster, Blake!" The voice boomed over the hiss of the industrial sanitizer. It was Gavin, the night shift manager. Gavin was a man of 40 who wore a tie that was too short and possessed a temper that was too short. He stood by the swinging doors, scrolling on his phone while watching Cassidy struggle with a stack of cast-iron pans. "I'm going as fast as I can, Gavin," Cassidy said, her voice raspy. She hadn't had water in 3 hours. "The scrubber is broken again. I have to do the pots by hand." "I don't care if you have to lick them clean," Gavin sneered, not looking up from his phone. "The morning prep team comes in at 5 a.m. If this pit isn't spotless, don't bother coming back for your shift tomorrow, and you know what happens if you lose this job." Cassidy flinched. She knew exactly what would happen. No job meant no cash payments under the table. No cash meant she couldn't pay the exorbitant fees to the nursing home where her younger sister Toby was currently living in the state-subsidized ward. It wasn't just rent, it was protection money. "I'll get it done," Cassidy whispered. She plunged her hands back into the scalding grey water. As she scrubbed, her mind drifted away from the pain in her fingers. To cope, she didn't hum songs or think about movies. She thought about numbers. If the volume of the sink is approximately 40 gallons, and the inflow rate of the tap is 2.5 gallons per minute, but the drain is leaking at a rate of 0.3 gallons per minute. She built equations in her head. It was the only place she felt safe. The world was chaotic, cruel, and unfair. But math was clean. Math made sense. In math, there was always a solution if you were brave enough to find it. She had been the top student at Northside High. She had a full scholarship waiting for her at MIT. Everyone said she was the next human computer. But that was 6 months ago, before the accident, before the debt, before she became invisible. Upstairs, far removed from the grease and the despair, Adrian Blackwood sat in the presidential suite. At 32, Adrian was the CEO of Blackwood Dynamics, a defense and logistics contractor worth billions. He was a man who had everything: private jets, a penthouse in Manhattan, and the ear of the president. But he didn't have sleep. Insomnia had plagued Adrian since he was a child. His mind was a high-speed engine that refused to idle. Tonight, he was in Chicago for a merger that was falling apart. His lead engineers had hit a wall on the aerodynamic fuel distribution system for their new drone prototype. It was a physics problem, a variable they couldn't isolate. He stared at the blueprints spread across the expensive mahogany desk. "It doesn't work," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "The drag coefficient doesn't match the fuel weight." He needed coffee. Real coffee, not the weak stuff in the hotel room machine. Adrian stood up, pulling on a black hoodie over his dress shirt, discarding his tie. He liked to walk the city when he couldn't sleep. He decided to go down to the hotel kitchen himself. He owned the hotel chain, after all, though none of the staff knew his face. He preferred to operate in the shadows. He took the service elevator down, bypassing the lobby, landing directly in the labyrinth of grey hallways that led to the kitchens. He expected it to be empty, save for maybe a sleepy chef prepping dough. He walked through the silent bakery section, the smell of yeast heavy in the air. He turned the corner toward the dish pit, seeking the coffee machine he knew was kept in the back for the staff. That was when he saw her, a slight girl, drowning in a uniform 2 sizes too big, fighting with a massive pot. But it wasn't her struggle that caught his eye. It was what she was doing between scrubs. Cassidy had a small, grease-stained notepad balanced on the edge of the metal sink. Every time she finished rinsing a plate, she would grab a stubby pencil, scribble furiously for 3 seconds, and then go back to washing. Adrian paused in the shadows of the doorframe. He was curious. Was she drawing? Writing a letter to a boyfriend? He moved closer, his sneakers silent on the tile floor. The manager, Gavin, had disappeared into the office to take a nap, leaving the girl alone. Adrian crept up behind a rack of drying trays. He squinted to see the notepad. He froze. It wasn't a drawing. It wasn't a love letter. It was a non-linear, partial differential equation, and not just any equation. She was factoring the drag variables of a fluid dynamic system. Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the girl, her hair messy, her apron filthy, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Then he looked back at the notepad. She wasn't just solving a math problem. She was solving his problem, the very problem that had stumped his team of PhDs for 3 weeks. No, Adrian whispered to himself. That's impossible. Cassidy dropped a heavy pan. Clang! The noise echoed like a gunshot. She jumped, spinning around, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw the tall figure in the black hoodie standing in the shadows, she didn't just look startled. She looked hunted. "I'm sorry," she cried out, immediately backing up against the sink, holding her wet hands up like a shield. "I wasn't stealing anything. I promise. Please don't tell Gavin. I was just working." Adrian stepped into the light. He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm not the manager," Adrian said, his voice deep and calm. "I'm just a guest. I came for coffee." Cassidy let out a shaky breath, but her body remained tense. She quickly swiped the notepad off the sink and shoved it into her apron pocket, as if it were contraband. "The coffee is over there," she pointed with a trembling finger. "But you shouldn't be back here. Guests aren't allowed. If Gavin sees you, he'll blame me." Adrian didn't move toward the coffee. He took a step toward her. "What was that?" he asked. "What was what?" Cassidy deflected, her eyes darting to the exit. "On the pad. You were integrating a variable function for wind resistance. I saw it." Cassidy's face went pale. "It's nothing. Just doodles. Homework." "That's not homework," Adrian said, narrowing his eyes. "That's doctoral-level physics. Who are you?" "Nobody," she snapped, a sudden flash of fire in her eyes. "I'm the dishwasher, and if you don't leave, I'm going to get fired. Please, just go." Adrian studied her. He saw the intelligence behind the fear. He saw the desperation in her posture. He was a billionaire, because he knew an investment opportunity when he saw one, and he knew a mystery when he smelled one. "I'll go," Adrian said. "But first, tell me the answer." "What?" "The equation you just hid. Does x equal 0, or does it approach infinity?" Cassidy bit her lip. She looked at the door, then back at him. The compulsion to answer was stronger than her fear. It was the curse of her gift. "Neither," she whispered. "It loops. You have to account for the thermal expansion. If you don't, the variable collapses. It's 4.2. Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. The answer. It was so simple. Thermal expansion. His team had forgotten to account for the heat generated by the friction. 4.2, he repeated. Before he could say another word, the office door banged open. "Who are you talking to, Blake?" Gavin's voice roared. Cassidy flinched violently. "No one. Just asking about room service trays." Gavin stormed into the room. He saw Adrian in the hoodie and sneered. He didn't recognize the owner of the hotel. He just saw a guy in casual clothes in his kitchen. "Hey, pal," Gavin barked, stepping into Adrian's personal space. "Get lost. This is a restricted area, and you—" He turned on Cassidy, poking a fat finger into her shoulder. "I told you no distractions. I'm docking your pay for this hour. One more strike, and you're on the street." Adrian's jaw tightened. He watched the man poke the girl. He watched Cassidy shrink away, accepting the abuse because she had no other choice. Adrian could have fired Gavin on the spot. He could have bought the building and burned it down. But he was a strategist. He needed to know why a girl who could solve thermal dynamics in her head was letting a middle manager treat her like garbage. "My fault," Adrian said smoothly, masking his rage. "I was lost looking for the gym. She was just directing me." Gavin grunted. "Yeah, well, get out. And Blake, get back to the pans." Adrian caught Cassidy's eye one last time. She looked terrified, pleading with him silently to leave before it got worse. Adrian turned and walked away. But as he rode the elevator back to the penthouse, he didn't go to sleep. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Grant," he said to his head of security. "Wake up. I need a background check. Immediate. The name is Blake. She works the night shift at the Gilded Spoon." "Boss, it's 3:06 a.m., Grant groaned. "I don't care," Adrian said, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "Find out who she is. Find out why she's there. And find out who she's hiding from." By 7 a.m., the sun was bleeding through the smog over Chicago, casting a grey light over the city. Adrian sat in his penthouse suite, a fresh pot of coffee untouched on the table. Grant, a former Navy SEAL with a scar running through his left eyebrow, stood in front of him holding a tablet. Grant looked grim. "You're not going to like this, Adrian," Grant said. "Try me." "Her name is Cassidy Hart, not Blake. She uses her mother's maiden name." "Hart." Adrian tested the name. Why does that sound familiar? Because her father was Robert Hart, the CFO of Vanguard Tech. Adrian sat up straighter. Vanguard Tech was a rival company, a massive conglomerate that had collapsed 2 years ago in a scandal of embezzlement and fraud. Robert Hart had been accused of stealing millions from the pension fund. He had committed suicide before the trial. "The daughter of the Vanguard thief," Adrian murmured. "It gets worse." Grant swiped on the tablet. "Cassidy was a prodigy. She was admitted to the University of Chicago's advanced physics program at age 16, but 6 months ago, she was expelled." "Expelled? For what?" "Cheating," Grant said. "Specifically, she was accused of hacking the university grading system to sell grades to other students. The dean, a man named Professor Julian Thorne, caught her red-handed. She was blacklisted. No university will touch her. Her scholarship was revoked." "Thorne," Adrian spat the name out. He knew Julian Thorne, a pompous academic who cared more about his tenure than his students. Did she do it? The evidence was overwhelming. Logs from her laptop. But here's the kicker, boss. After her dad died, the government seized all their assets. House, cars, savings. Cassidy and her younger sister Toby were left with nothing. Then Toby got sick. Acute leukemia. She needs specialized treatment that insurance won't cover because of the pre-existing condition clauses in the cheap state plans. Adrian stood up and walked to the window. The pieces were falling into place. So she works under the table, Adrian said quietly. To pay for the sister. She works 3 jobs, Grant corrected. Waitress at night, courier in the morning, and she cleans offices on weekends. She sends every cent to a private care facility called St. Jude's Haven. And the math? Adrian asked. Why was she doing my equations? I don't know, Grant admitted. But if she was smart enough to hack a university mainframe, she's smart enough to solve your drone problem. Adrian shook his head. I don't think she hacked anything, Grant. A girl who is that terrified of losing a minimum wage dishwashing job isn't a criminal mastermind. She's a victim. What do you want to do? Grant asked. Adrian buttoned his cuffs. His eyes were cold, calculated. I want to see how good she really is. And I want to know who really framed her. Because nobody falls that hard by accident. We going to the diner? Grant asked. No. Adrian smiled, a shark-like grin. She's a courier in the mornings, right? Who does she deliver for? Speed Ego delivery, bicycle messenger. Order something, Adrian said. Have it delivered here, specifically to this room, and make sure she's the one who brings it. 3 hours later, Cassidy was pedaling her rusted bicycle against the biting wind of the Chicago streets. Her legs burned. She had slept for exactly 45 minutes on a cot in the back of the diner before starting her courier shift. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the dispatch app. VIP delivery. Rush. Destination. Fairmont Hotel, penthouse suite. Package. Legal documents from Sterling and Associates. Tip. $500 guaranteed upon timely delivery. Cassidy nearly fell off her bike. $500? That was 2 weeks of Toby's medication. She accepted the job instantly. She picked up the envelope from the law firm downtown and pedaled as if her life depended on it. She arrived at the Fairmont, breathless, sweating in her neon windbreaker. She looked nothing like the girl from the kitchen the night before, yet the exhaustion in her eyes was identical. She took the service elevator up to the penthouse. She felt out of place. The carpets were too thick. The air smelled too clean. She knocked on the heavy oak door. "Delivery!" she called out. The door opened, but it wasn't a receptionist or a butler. It was him, the man in the hoodie. Only now, he was wearing a tailored Italian suit that cost more than her entire life's earnings. Cassidy froze, the envelope clutching in her hand. Hello, Cassidy, Adrian said calmly. You're the guy from the kitchen, she stammered, taking a step back. Are you stalking me? How do you know my name? Come in, Adrian stepped aside. No, she said, her instincts screaming danger. I'm just dropping this off. She held out the envelope. The envelope is empty, Adrian said. I sent it to myself. I wanted to talk to you. Cassidy dropped the envelope. You're one of them, aren't you? One of my dad's creditors? Look, I don't have the money. I'm paying as fast as I can. I don't care about your father's money, Adrian said. He walked to the center of the room, where a massive whiteboard was set up. It was covered in complex equations, the same problem from the night before, but expanded. I care about this, Adrian pointed to the board. I plugged in your number, 4.2. It worked. The simulation stabilized. You solved in 3 minutes what my team couldn't solve in 6 months. Cassidy looked at the board. The hunger for the math warred with her fear. She stepped tentatively into the room. "You missed the coefficient of friction on the third derivative," she mumbled, almost involuntarily. "I know," Adrian said. "That's why I need you." "Need me?" Cassidy laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Mister, I wash dishes. I deliver fake envelopes. I am a dropout with a criminal record for academic fraud. You don't need me. You need a PR nightmare." "I know about Julian Thorne," Adrian said. The name hit her like a physical blow. Cassidy went rigid. "Don't say his name. I know he expelled you. I know you were the top student. And I know that Julian Thorne is currently on the board of directors for the university, pushing for a grant that relies on research, very similar to what you were working on." Cassidy looked down at her worn-out sneakers. "He stole it," she whispered. "He stole my algorithm. When I tried to report him, he planted the hacking software on my laptop. He told everyone I was a cheater. He destroyed me to protect his tenure." She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "Nobody believed me. My dad was a thief, so everyone assumed the daughter was a liar too." Adrian walked over to her. He didn't offer pity. He offered something better. "I believe you," Adrian said, "and I'm going to offer you a job." "I can't work for a tech company." Cassidy wiped her eyes. "I'm blacklisted." "You won't be working as an engineer." "Not yet," Adrian said. "I need a personal assistant, someone to handle my private scheduling. But in reality, you'll be my shadow consultant. You solve the problems, I take the credit, and I pay you $10,000 a month." Cassidy stopped breathing. "10,000? Plus full medical benefits for your immediate family, including pre-existing conditions." Cassidy felt her knees give way. She grabbed the doorframe for support. It was the lifeline she had been praying for. It was Toby's life. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because," Adrian's eyes darkened, "Julian Thorne just cost me a government contract with his incompetence. I don't just want to hire you, Cassidy. I want to use you to destroy him." Cassidy straightened up. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "When do I start?" The transformation took 2 days. Adrian provided Cassidy with a wardrobe that was professional, but modest. Blazers, slacks, glasses that framed her face rather than hiding it. But the biggest change wasn't the clothes, it was the access. For the first time in 6 months, Cassidy wasn't invisible. She walked into Blackwood Dynamics with a security badge clipped to her lapel. However, the arrangement was dangerous. Adrian had to keep her true role a secret. If the board found out he was taking technical advice from the disgraced daughter of Robert Hart, his stock price would tank. "You are my assistant," Adrian reminded her as they walked toward the conference room. "You take notes, you pour water. If you see a mistake in the presentation, you do not speak. You text me." "Understood," Cassidy said, clutching a tablet. "Today is important," Adrian said, stopping at the door. "We are meeting with the review board for the University Grant Partnership. They are deciding which private firm gets access to the university's supercomputer." Cassidy felt a pit in her stomach. "The university?" "Yes." "And guess who represents them?" Before Cassidy could answer, the glass doors opened. Sitting at the head of the table was a man with silver hair, a perfectly trimmed beard, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Professor Julian Thorne. Cassidy froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was the man who had ruined her life. The man who had looked her in the eye while he destroyed her reputation. Thorne looked up. His gaze slid over Adrian, respectful and eager, and then landed on the assistant. For a second, there was no recognition. Cassidy looked different than the crying, hoodie-wearing student he had expelled. But then he looked closer. He saw the eyes, Thorne's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning, tighter than before. Mr. Blackwood. Thorne stood up, extending a hand. Always a pleasure. Professor Thorne. Adrian shook his hand firmly. I believe you know my new executive assistant. Miss Hart. The room went silent. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. They all knew the name, Hart. Thorne laughed, a dry, condescending sound. Hart? Well, isn't that a coincidence? I certainly hope she's better at filing than she was at extracurriculars. It was a direct jab, a reminder that he held the power. He was daring Adrian to defend her. Cassidy looked down, her knuckles white on the tablet. Don't react. Do it for Toby. She's excellent at her job, Adrian said coldly. Shall we begin? The meeting was a disaster from the start. Thorne was presenting his team's research on quantum encryption protocols. He was arrogant, using big words to mask mediocre data. Cassidy stood in the corner, listening. As Thorne spoke, she tapped furiously on her phone. Text to Adrian. He's lying about the stability rate. Look at slide 4. The variance is 12%. That's dangerously high. If they run that on the supercomputer, it will overheat the servers. Adrian glanced at his watch, reading the message. He looked up at Thorne. Professor, Adrian interrupted. Slide 4. Your variance seems low. Did you account for the heat load? Thorne waved his hand dismissively. Of course, it's theoretical, but sound. Text to Adrian. Ask him about the cooling algorithm. He's using the Larison method. That method was debunked in 2023. He's using old data because he doesn't know how to write the new code. Adrian smiled. Are you using the Larison method, Professor? Thorne stiffened. He tugged at his collar. Well, as a baseline, yes. But that's obsolete, Adrian pressed. If Blackwood Dynamics is going to fund this, we need cutting edge, not recycled theories. Thorne's face turned red. He glared at Adrian, and then his eyes darted to the corner, to Cassidy. He saw her typing. He realized what was happening. The dumb assistant was feeding the billionaire the questions. I see, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. It seems Mr. Blackwood has brought a cheat sheet. Tell me, Miss Hart, do you have something to add? Or are you just plagiarizing off your phone again? The insult hung in the air. Adrian stood up slowly. Careful, Julian. No, Thorne snapped, dropping the pretense. I won't be questioned by a man who hires criminals. This girl is a fraud. She was expelled for hacking. She is a liability. And frankly, Adrian, having her in this room is an insult to this institution. Thorne turned to the other board members. I move that we suspend this meeting until Mr. Blackwood removes the non-essential personnel. I will not have my proprietary work exposed to a known thief. Cassidy felt the tears burning. It was happening again. The shame, the public humiliation. She turned to leave, unable to breathe. Stay right there, Cassidy. Adrian's voice was like a whip crack. He turned to Thorne. You want to talk about thieves, Julian? Let's talk about the Hart algorithm. Thorne's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Adrian walked to the screen and plugged in his own laptop. Because last night, I had my team run a comparison between the code you just presented and the corrupted files found on Cassidy's laptop 6 months ago. Adrian hit a key. 2 sets of code appeared on the big screen. They were identical. You didn't just expel her, Adrian said, his voice rising. You stole her work. You branded her a cheater so you could publish her discovery under your name. That's why you got the tenure, isn't it? Thorne began to sweat. This is preposterous. That code is generic. It proves nothing. Maybe, Adrian said. But Ms. Hart included a digital watermark in her code, a signature hidden in the sublines. If we scroll down to line 4000, Adrian scrolled. There, hidden in the complex math, was a comment line that the compiler ignored, but humans could read. "Kiki, for Toby, keep fighting." The room went deathly silent. Thorne looked like he was about to vomit. "That's," Thorne stammered. "She planted that. She hacked my system." "No," Cassidy spoke up for the first time, her voice shaking but clear. "I wrote that code in the hospital waiting room while my sister was getting chemo. That's why it's clumsy in the middle. I was distracted." She stepped forward, looking Thorne in the eye. "You didn't just steal my work, Professor. You stole my sister's future. You took my scholarship, which meant I couldn't pay for her treatment." The other board members were looking at Thorne with horror. "Get out," the chairman of the board whispered to Thorne. "You can't do this," Thorne screamed. "I am the department head." "Not anymore," Adrian said. "And we're just getting started. Wait until the police see the bank transfers." Thorne was escorted out by security, shouting obscenities. Cassidy stood there, trembling. Adrian walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. But the victory was short-lived. As they left the building, Adrian's phone rang. It was Grant. "Boss, we have a problem," Grant said urgently. "Thorne isn't just an academic. He owes money to some very bad people. People connected to Cassidy's father's old debts. They know she's with you now. They know she's the one who exposed Thorne. So they aren't going to sue her, Adrian. I just intercepted a call. They're going to the nursing home. They're going for the sister." Adrian's blood ran cold. He looked at Cassidy, who was smiling for the first time in months. "Cassidy," Adrian said, grabbing her arm, "get in the car, now. What's wrong? We have to get to St. Jude's. Right now." The war wasn't over. It had just moved from the boardroom to the streets. The tires of Adrian's armored SUV screeched against the asphalt as they sped toward St. Jude's Haven. The city of Chicago blurred into streaks of gray and steel outside the tinted windows. But inside the car, the air was thick with a suffocating silence. Cassidy sat in the back seat, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles turned white. She wasn't doing math in her head anymore. The comfort of numbers had abandoned her. The variables were too chaotic. There was no equation for the safety of a sick little girl against a criminal syndicate. "Faster, Grant," Adrian commanded from the passenger seat. His voice was calm, but it possessed an edge that Cassidy had never heard before. It was the voice of a man who was used to war, not boardrooms. "We're doing 90 and a 40, boss," Grant replied, his eyes scanning the mirrors. "ETA is 2 minutes." "Who are they?" Cassidy whispered, her voice small. "The people coming for Toby. Who are they?" Adrian turned to look at her. The mask of the billionaire CEO had slipped, revealing something more human and far more dangerous. "They are collectors, Cassidy. Men hired by the shadow investors who backed your father's company. When Vanguard Tech fell, they lost millions. They believe your father hid that money, and they believe you know where it is." "I don't," Cassidy cried, tears spilling over. "I was 18. I didn't know anything about his business. We lost the house. We lost everything. If we had millions, do you think I would be washing dishes at 3 a.m.? "I know," Adrian said, his voice softening. "But greed doesn't listen to logic. And right now, Thorne's exposure has spooked them. They think you're making a play. They think you're powerful now. So they're going to try to take your leverage." "Toby." The SUV swerved around a corner, hopping the curb before slamming to a halt in front of the brick facade of the nursing home. It was a depressing building, underfunded and crumbling, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers of downtown. Before the car had even fully stopped, Grant was out the door. "Stay close to me," he barked. Adrian jumped out, extending a hand to Cassidy. She took it, and he pulled her close, shielding her with his body as they ran toward the glass sliding doors. The lobby was in chaos. Two large men in cheap leather jackets were arguing with the terrified receptionist behind the plexiglass counter. One of them had a crowbar resting casually on his shoulder. The other was trying to force open the security door that led to the patient wards. "I told you!" the receptionist screamed, shaking. "You can't go back there without a pass." "And I told you," the man with the crowbar sneered. "We're family." "Hey!" Grant's voice boomed through the lobby. The two men turned. They weren't professionals. They were hired muscle, messy, loud, and arrogant. But when they saw Grant, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, they hesitated. "Private security," the man with the crowbar grunted. "This doesn't concern you, pal. We're here for the kid, Tobias Hart." "Her name is Toby," Cassidy shouted, stepping out from behind Adrian. "And she's a girl, you idiots!" The thugs laughed. "Girl, boy, doesn't matter. The boss just said, 'Bring the Hart kid.'" The man with the crowbar took a step toward Cassidy. "You must be the sister. Why don't you come along, too? Save us a trip." Adrian stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't assume a fighting stance. He simply adjusted his cufflinks. "I'm going to give you one chance to walk out of that door," Adrian said. "If you leave now, you keep your kneecaps. If you take one more step, you spend the next 6 months eating through a straw." The thug sneered. "Do you know who we work for, pretty boy? We work for—" He didn't finish the sentence. Grant moved with a speed that defied his size. In 2 strides, he closed the distance. He grabbed the crowbar mid-swing, twisted the man's wrist with a sickening crunch, and drove his knee into the man's stomach. The thug folded like a wet napkin. The second man reached for a gun tucked in his waistband, but Adrian was already there. He kicked the man's knee backward, shattering the joint, and followed it with a precise, brutal punch to the throat. It was over in 6 seconds. The lobby was silent, save for the groans of the 2 men on the floor. "Get to the ward," Adrian told Cassidy, straightening his suit jacket as if he had just brushed off some lint. "Grant, secure the exit. Police are 5 minutes out. We need to be gone in 3. Cassidy didn't wait. She sprinted through the security doors, down the hallway that smelled of antiseptic and despair. She burst into room 304. Toby was there, sitting up in her bed, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. She looked pale, her eyes wide with fear from the noise in the lobby. She was only 12, but sickness had made her frail. "Cassie?" Toby whispered. "I've got you," Cassidy choked out, ripping the IV lines out with practiced care and wrapping Toby in a blanket. "We have to go. We're going on a trip." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." Adrian appeared in the doorway. He looked at the small, fragile girl in the bed, and his expression softened completely. He walked over and effortlessly lifted Toby into his arms. "Hi, Toby," Adrian said gently. "My name is Adrian. I'm a friend of your sister. I'm going to carry you, okay?" Toby nodded, burying her face in his shoulder. They exited through the back service door, just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. They loaded into the SUV, leaving the chaos of Cassidy's old life behind. As they merged onto the highway, heading away from the city and toward the countryside, Cassidy watched the skyline fade. She looked at Adrian, who was carefully tucking the blanket around her sleeping sister. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Adrian said, his eyes fixed on the road. "We just poked the bear. The men who sent those thugs aren't going to stop. We need to find out what they really want. And to do that, we need to solve the one equation your father never finished." "What equation?" "The one that explains where the money went." The Blackwood estate was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located on a private island in the middle of a lake 2 hours north of Chicago, it was accessible only by a single bridge or helicopter. For 3 days it became their sanctuary. Cassidy had never experienced luxury. She was used to cold showers, instant noodles, and the constant gnawing anxiety of debt. Here the sheets were made of Egyptian cotton. The food was prepared by a private chef. A team of concierge doctors had been flown in to set up a private treatment room for Toby in the East Wing. For the first time in years, Cassidy slept for 8 hours straight. But the peace was an illusion. While Toby recovered, Adrian and Cassidy were at war. They turned the library into a command center. Servers hummed in the corner, cooling fans whirring as they processed terabytes of data. "I don't understand," Cassidy said, pacing in front of a whiteboard covered in financial records. "My father was the CFO. If he stole the money, there would be a paper trail. But the accounts just vanish. It's like the money evaporated." Adrian sat at the mahogany desk, scrolling through the recovered files from Julian Thorne's laptop, the laptop Grant had acquired before the police seizure. "Thorne was a middleman," Adrian said. "He was being paid to keep you down, to keep you desperate. Why? Because if I was busy surviving, I wouldn't be looking for this." Cassidy tapped a printed spreadsheet. "This is the Phantom Fund. The missing $40 million. "Exactly." Adrian stood up, walking over to her. The proximity between them was electric. Over the last few days, the professional distance had eroded. They ate dinner together every night. They sat by Toby's bedside together. Adrian had seen Cassidy's vulnerability, and she had seen his protectiveness. "Cassidy," Adrian said softly, "look at the transaction dates. The money wasn't withdrawn, it was converted." "Converted into what? Crypto?" "No, too volatile," Adrian mused. "Bonds? Too traceable." Cassidy grabbed a marker. She looked at the transaction codes. To anyone else, they were random alphanumeric strings. But to her, to the girl who saw the world in patterns, they were a language. "Wait," she murmured. She circled the last 3 digits of every transaction. 314, 1259, 29605. "Pi," she whispered. "What?" "It's pi. The digits of pi. My dad. He was using a mathematical cipher." Her eyes widened. "He didn't steal the money. He encrypted it. He locked it inside the company's own mainframe, but he keyed it to a variable that keeps shifting." She began to write furiously on the whiteboard. The equation grew, sprawling across the glass surface. It was a chaotic mess of integrals and logic gates. Adrian watched her, mesmerized. She was beautiful when she worked. Her mind was a weapon, sharper than any technology he owned. "The key," Cassidy said, breathless, stepping back. "The key to unlock the funds isn't a password. It's a solution to a specific fluid dynamic problem." She froze. She looked at Adrian. "The drone problem," she whispered. Adrian's eyes widened. "The problem you solved in the kitchen?" "Yes. That's why Thorne was trying to steal my research. That's why he wanted access to the university's supercomputer. He wasn't trying to fix a drone. He was trying to brute force my father's encryption to get the $40 million. And he couldn't solve it," Adrian realized. "Your father designed the lock so that only you could open it. He taught you those specific math theories when you were a kid, didn't he?" "He did," Cassidy said, tears pricking her eyes. "He used to call them our secret language. He knew they were coming for him. He hid the money to protect it from them, and he left the key in my head." "So who is them?" Adrian asked. Just then, the heavy library doors creaked open. Grant stood there, holding a tablet. His face was pale. "Boss," Grant said, "we have a problem. A big one." "What is it?" I just traced the IP address that was communicating with Thorne, the person giving him the orders, the person who sent the thugs to the nursing home. Who is it? Adrian demanded. Grant swallowed hard. It's Victor Sterling. Adrian slammed his fist onto the desk. Sterling. Cassidy looked between them. Who is Victor Sterling? He's the CEO of Sterling Heavy Industries, Adrian said, his voice dripping with venom. My biggest competitor. And my godfather. The betrayal hung in the air like smoke. Sterling was on the board of Vanguard Tech, Adrian explained, pacing rapidly. He must have orchestrated the embezzlement to bankrupt the company and buy its assets for pennies. But your father hid the liquid cash before Sterling could get it. Sterling has been hunting for that money for 2 years, and he used Thorne to watch you, waiting for you to unknowingly solve the puzzle. And now he knows I'm with you, Cassidy said quietly. He knows, Grant confirmed, and he just sent a message. Grant handed the tablet to Adrian. On the screen was a live video feed. It showed the interior of the Gilded Spoon diner. Gavin, the manager, was tied to a chair. Standing behind him was a man in a masked tactical suit holding a phone. A voice came through the speakers, smooth, cultured, and terrifying. Hello, Adrian. I believe you have something of mine, the girl, and the key inside her head. It was Victor Sterling. I have grown tired of waiting, Sterling continued. I have rigged the diner with enough C4 to level the block. I also have men stationed outside the hospital where you transferred the little sister's records. You think she's safe on your island? I have drones too, Adrian. Better ones. Adrian's face went rigid. Here is the deal, Sterling said. Tomorrow night is the Escapade Charity Gala at the Museum of Science. I want Cassidy to walk through the front door, alone. She will bring a tablet with the decryption key entered. If she does this, I disappear. If she doesn't, well, I hope you like fireworks. The feed cut to black. Silence engulfed the library. He's bluffing about the island, Grant said instantly. Our air defense is impenetrable. But he's not bluffing about the diner, Cassidy said, her voice trembling. Or the other people he could hurt. He's a monster. We aren't giving you to him, Adrian said firmly. Never. We don't have a choice, Cassidy said, looking at the equation on the board. He wants the money. If I give him the key, he wins. No. Adrian walked over and took her hands. If you give him the key, he kills you. You're the loose end. So what do we do? Cassidy asked, looking up into his eyes. Adrian looked at the equation again. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. We rewrite the equation, Adrian said. He wants a key? Let's give him a virus. The Museum of Science and Industry was a cathedral of glass and light, hosting the most elite members of Chicago society. The annual Future of Tech Gala was the event of the season. Champagne flowed, diamonds sparkled, and in the center of the great hall, Victor Sterling held court. Sterling was a man of 60, distinguished, charming, and utterly soulless. He shook hands with senators and laughed with investors, acting the part of the benevolent billionaire. At 9 below p.m. sharp, the hush fell over the room as the main doors opened. Cassidy Hart stepped in. She was not wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like a starry sky. Her hair was swept up, revealing a diamond necklace that Adrian had placed around her neck an hour ago. She looked like a queen, but in her hands she clutched a simple black tablet. The crowd parted. Whispers rippled through the room. They recognized her, or rather, the rumors of her. The fallen prodigy. Sterling stopped mid-laugh. He watched her approach, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He checked his watch. Right on time. He excused himself from the senator and walked to the center of the room to meet her. "Cassidy," Sterling said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You clean up nicely. Much better than the dish pit." "Where is the detonator?" Cassidy asked, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "All in due time," Sterling smiled. "Do you have it?" Cassidy held up the tablet. "The algorithm. It unlocks the offshore accounts, all 40 million. "Good girl." Sterling reached for it. "Wait." Cassidy pulled it back. "I want confirmation. Call off your dogs at the diner. And the hospital." Sterling sighed, pulling out his phone. He typed a command. "Done. Stand down, orders issued. Now give it to me." He snatched the tablet from her hands. He tapped the screen, executing the file named Project Paki. Loading bars flashed on the screen. "Verify it," Sterling commanded his personal aide, who materialized beside him with a laptop. They connected the tablet. The aide typed furiously. "It's real, sir," the aide whispered, eyes wide. "The funds. They're unlocking. The encryption is dissolving." Sterling laughed. It was a sound of pure victory. "Finally. Your father was a stubborn fool, Cassidy. But you are practical." "I just want my sister to live," Cassidy said. "And she will?" Sterling stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "As long as you disappear. I have a plane waiting. You will go to a very nice, very private facility in Switzerland. You will stay there. Forever." Cassidy looked him in the eye. "No." Sterling frowned. "Excuse me." "I said no," Cassidy said, her voice rising, echoing in the silent hall. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." Suddenly, the massive projection screens that lined the walls of the museum, screens that were supposed to be displaying calming geometric patterns, glitched. Static roared through the speakers. Then, a new image appeared. It wasn't art, it was a bank statement. Victor Sterling, personal offshore ledger. The crowd gasped. "What is this?" Sterling yelled, looking around. "Cut the feed." But the images changed. Emails, text messages, surveillance photos, email from V. Sterling to J. Thorne. "Break the girl. Make sure she never gets a degree. I need her desperate. Wire transfer. $50,000 to Chicago PD evidence room. Bribe." Video clip. Sterling's voice, recorded hours ago in the diner. "I have rigged the diner with enough C4 to level the block." The gala erupted into chaos. Sterling looked down at the tablet in his hand. The screen had turned red. A single message pulsed in the center. Variable unbalanced. Karma protocol initiated. "You..." Sterling looked at Cassidy with pure hatred. "What did you do?" "I didn't give you the key to the money, Victor," Cassidy said, her voice ringing with authority. "I gave you a tracer. When you executed that file, you didn't just open my father's accounts. You opened yours. You gave my algorithm root access to your entire digital life. Every bribe, every murder order, every stolen cent. It's all being broadcast to the FBI, the SEC, and, well, YouTube." Sterling lunged for her. "I'll kill you." But he never reached her. Adrian Blackwood emerged from the crowd, stepping out of the shadows like an avenging angel. He caught Sterling's wrist in midair. "Get your hands off her," Adrian growled. Adrian didn't just stop him. He shoved Sterling backward with enough force to send the older man sprawling onto the polished floor. "It's over, Victor," Adrian said, standing over him. "Blackwood Security has already secured the diner. Your men are in custody, and the police are walking through the front doors right now." Sirens wailed outside, louder and closer this time. Blue and red lights flashed through the glass walls of the museum. Sterling scrambled backward, looking for an escape, but he was surrounded. The elite of Chicago, the people he had tried to impress, were filming him with their phones, their faces twisted in disgust. Grant appeared with a team of police officers. They hauled Sterling to his feet and slapped cuffs on his wrists. As they dragged him away, Sterling screamed, "She's a fraud! She's nothing! She's just a dishwasher!" Cassidy stood tall, the blue silk flowing around her. She looked at Adrian. "I'm not just a dishwasher," she said softly. "No," Adrian smiled, taking her hand and kissing the knuckles right over the scars from the scouring pads. "You're the smartest person in the room." 6 months later. The snow was falling softly on the campus of the University of Chicago, dusting the Gothic gargoyles in white powder. Cassidy Hart walked down the stone path, clutching a stack of books to her chest. She wasn't sneaking around this time. She wasn't hiding in a hoodie. She stopped at the foot of the steps to the physics department. The sign out front had been changed. The Julian Thorne wing was gone. It was now the Robert Hart Memorial Library, funded by a generous donation from Blackwood Dynamics. "Hey, Slowpoke." Cassidy turned. Adrian was leaning against a sleek black sports car parked at the curb. He looked different, less stressed, happier. He was wearing a casual coat and a scarf she had knitted for him, using a mathematical pattern, of course. "I'm not slow," Cassidy smiled, walking over to him. "I was just calculating the trajectory of the snowflakes. And I predict a 100% chance of hot chocolate in my immediate future." Adrian laughed and opened the car door for her. "Get in. We have to pick up Toby from piano lessons." Toby was in remission. The treatments had worked. With the Phantom Fund recovered and legally cleared by the courts as evidence of her father's innocence, the money had been returned to the family. Cassidy had paid back every cent of debt, donated millions to St. Jude's, and kept enough to ensure she and Toby would never be hungry again. But she didn't stop working. Cassidy had returned to school, not as a freshman, but as a guest lecturer while she finished her doctorate. The Hart Blackwood Drive, the finished drone engine, had revolutionized the aerospace industry. Adrian got into the driver's seat but didn't start the car. He turned to her. "I have a question," he said. "Is it about the thermal variance in the new prototype?" Cassidy asked, buckling her seatbelt. "Because I told you, if you adjust the intake manifold—" "No," Adrian cut her off gently. "It's not about physics." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Cassidy's breath hitched. "I've been trying to solve this equation for months," Adrian said, his eyes searching hers. "Two people, two different worlds, brought together by a grease stain and a math problem. What is the probability that they stay together forever?" He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a diamond cut in a perfect geometric ratio. "I ran the numbers," Adrian whispered. "It approaches infinity." Cassidy looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen her when she was invisible, the man who had gone to war for her. "You're wrong," Cassidy said, a tear sliding down her cheek. Adrian looked panicked for a split second. "I am? It doesn't approach infinity." Cassidy smiled, leaning in to kiss him. "It is infinity." As they kissed, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white. The 3 a.m. shifts, the burnt hands, the fear, the hunger. It was all in the past. Cassidy Hart had solved the hardest problem of all, how to be happy, and she didn't even need a calculator. And that is how a late-night dishwasher toppled a corrupt empire with nothing but her mind. It proves that no matter where you start, even if it's at the bottom of a sink full of dirty dishes, your true value is something no one can take away. Cassidy didn't just wash plates, she cleaned up the whole city. What did you think of Adrian's revenge? Would you have forgiven Sterling, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.